Good afternoon. Welcome to the Surrendered and Abandoned Vessel Exchange Grant Application Workshop for 2022. We call this program SAVE. My name is Ron Kent. I manage the SAVE program for California State Parks, Division of Boating and Waterways, and I'll be hosting this webinar today. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our webpage for future reference. Everyone is muted during the presentation. Please write any questions in the chat and we will address those at the end of the presentation. The purpose of the SAVE grant is to prevent and reduce and remove recreational vessels from polluting our waterways and/or creating navigational hazards. The grants are authorized by Harbors and Navigation Code, or HNC, Section 525. Funding is available to local public agencies for the removal and disposal of abandoned recreational vessels and disposal of surrendered recreational vessels, and for the removal of partially submerged objects that pose a substantial hazard to navigation. HNC 522 defines an abandoned vessel as any derelict, wreck, or part of a watercraft that is sunk, beached, or in an unseaworthy condition in or adjacent to a publicly owned navigable waterway. I want to point out the term adjacent to publicly owned navigable waterway. DBW considers this to be a vessel that could enter the water from high tide in coastal regions and the Delta to high water flow in a river from spring runoff, snowmelt, or other high water flow occurrence. Vessels abandoned on a road, in a yard, at a business, or on private property not adjacent to navigable public waterways are not eligible for SAVE. Additionally, a vessel abandoned in a marina slip is not considered a substantial hazard to navigation and therefore not eligible to be disposed of with SAVE funding as an abandoned watercraft. HNC 526.1 identifies that a surrendered vessel must be turned in by the verified registered owner, and the receiving agency has determined that the vessel is in danger of becoming abandoned if not surrendered. I'll talk more about verified registered owner later in the presentation. HNC 525.1a also states that SAVE funding can be used for the removal of, quote, any other partially submerged objects that pose a substantial hazard to navigation, unquote. Reimbursement from SAVE for removal of partially submerged objects requires DBW prior approval. I want to point out a common misconception regarding HNC 550 and 551. These do state local agencies that have jurisdiction may immediately remove marine debris that is a hazard to navigation, a public nuisance, or a danger to health, safety, or the environment. These codes identify your authority. They do not state that SAVE funding may be used to cover the costs. Your agency's Submerged Navigation Hazard Abatement Plan, or what we call SNAP, should provide you guidance for handling these types of situations and how your agency will fund them. We will discuss the SNAP further during the application portion of the presentation. In summary, here's a brief checklist to determine if vessels or objects can be surrendered or abandoned using grant funding. For each scenario, all of the items need to be checked. Abandoned vessels need to be recreational vessels and in or adjacent to publicly owned navigable waterways. Surrendered vessels need to be recreational vessels and surrendered by registered owner, and it is in danger of being abandoned. Partially submerged objects are partially submerged and pose a substantial threat to navigation. Vessels abandoned on the road in a parking lot, on a private property, or etc., cannot be removed or destroyed with funding from this program. Commercial vessels cannot be removed and or destroyed under any circumstances with this funding. If you are awarded a grant, it is important to note that only vessels meeting these definitions are eligible to be disposed of with SAVE funding. It is also important that you verify the location of each vessel before you schedule removal. We have received some reimbursement requests for vessels that have been abandoned at a marina, but they were dry docked or on trailers. These vessels are not allowed to be removed under this program unless they have been surrendered prior to removal and disposal. Grant applications must be submitted using DBW's online grant application system, also known as OLGA. OLGA can be accessed directly from the SAVE Grant webpage or DBW's Grants and Loan homepage using the link provided on this slide. Once on DBW's webpage, there will be a green box on the right sidebar that includes the link to OLGA and a link to a 45-minute OLGA instructional webinar that I highly recommend you watch. Once you are signed into OLGA, remember you are applying for the SAVE-22 grant program. The application is now open and the deadline for submitting your SAVE-22 application is April 29th, 2022 at 5 p.m. SAVE application questions are a mix of yes and no, multiple choice, narrative, and fill-in. Some questions require a brief explanation. These fields have character limits, so you will need to be concise. Scoring for each question is designed to weigh the responses according to the objectives of Harbors and Navigation Code 525. Scores are weighted as follows: prevention 20%, control 20%, cost efficiency 20%, existence of an active enforcement program is 15%, your SNAP is 15%, and risk assessment of the application is 10%. Next, we'll cover key components of the application that will be used to assess your agency's ability to meet the SAVE grant priorities. There are two minimum qualifications, and both must be met to be eligible for funding. They are having an active enforcement program and having authority to tag and remove abandoned vessels. The application requires that you upload the local ordinance or resolution that provides this authority. DBW encourages grantees to promote and receive surrendered vessels in an effort to reduce the higher cost associated with disposal of abandoned vessels. Several questions are designed to determine the level at which your agency encourages boat owners to utilize the surrendered vessel option. The questions will include topics like how often you visit marinas in your area of responsibility, do you pass out flyers, literature while on patrol, and do you attend local events in an effort to reach out to boaters. DBW is encouraging SAVE grantees to find ways that provide maximum cost efficiency. Some ideas for accomplishing cost efficiency include destroying multiple vessels at one time, working with marinas who can accommodate on-site destruction, finding ways for hauling vessels directly to the landfill, and making arrangements for surrendered vessels to be delivered to the landfill by the owner. 20% of your score will be based on cost efficiency. 15% of available points are from questions assessing an agency's Submerged Navigation Hazard Abatement Plan. Again, we call this SNAP. A well-written SNAP will address strategies, including a source of funding, for prevention of abandoned vessels and for removal of substantial navigation hazards such as submerged objects, logs, abandoned piers, vehicles, etc., which are not eligible for reimbursement using SAVE funding. You will need to upload your SNAP to the application. Points will be assessed according to the quality and thoroughness of the plan. The application includes a budget detail worksheet. You'll first list the vessels you currently have identified that have been abandoned and those you know will be surrendered, and estimate the cost of processing each vessel through destruction. Next, you'll estimate the number and cost of disposal of additional future vessels you anticipate removing or receiving over the life of the grant, which is approximately 2 years. This estimate could be based on past performance and records, current records of vessels that are being monitored, and or a list of owners that have contacted you wanting to surrender their vessels. Vessels listed on these spreadsheets should not be considered as approved for disposal by DVW. I'm going to read that again. Vessels listed on these spreadsheets should not be considered as approved for disposal by DVW. The budget worksheet requires that you provide a justification to support these estimates. Note that the total request plus 10% match will equal the total project cost. These totals must match the amounts requested on page 1 of the application, or you will get an error in OLGA when you validate. Keep in mind that the applications will be reviewed and scored by a team of independent reviewers who do not work within the SAVE program. This promotes equity and transparency in the award process. For applications received from applicants who have had a SAVE grant during any of the past 3 grant cycles, the SAVE program manager will prepare a brief assessment of the applicant's past performance in terms of managing their SAVE grant, including submission of accurate reimbursement request packages and responding to requests for additional information or revisions of inaccurately submitted reimbursement requests. This is the risk assessment category and is worth up to 10 points. Agencies with a history of submitting incomplete, inaccurate reimbursement requests or not following guidance provided in the grant agreement and fully executed letter may receive lower scores. Once awards are determined, OLGA will generate either a denial letter or a notification of award and instructions for executing the grant agreement. Your agency may not get everything it asked for, as there is tremendous need across the state. Additionally, as stated before, agencies may receive award amounts based on past performance. Work performed before the agreement is executed will not be reimbursed. Do not begin work related to the award at this point, as you do not have a fully executed agreement yet. OLGA emails notifications and grant awards to the person that submitted the application. If the person leaves your agency, please notify DVW right away so we can update our records. Additionally, you should notify DVW if other staff who have created a profile in OLGA are no longer with your agency, so we can have their profiles removed. The award notification has specific instructions on downloading a copy of the grant agreement and where it needs to be signed or initialed, as well as the need for a resolution from your agency's governing body providing authorization to accept and sign the grant agreement. Make sure the person and or title listed in the resolution is the person that signs the agreement. Once we receive the signed agreement with all signatures, initials necessary, and the resolution, we will process the documents through DVW and upload the fully executed agreement into OLGA. OLGA will email a notice of fully executed agreement and instructions letter to the same person that applied for the grant. This is your authorization that you may begin work. Please do not load the signed agreement and or the resolution into OLGA. It needs to be mailed or emailed to DVW. Now we'll cover tips for managing a SAVE grant if you are awarded. The two lists on the slide show exactly what expenses are eligible to be reimbursed with SAVE funding. For abandoned vessels, eligible expenses are raising of submerged vessels, hazardous material removal and disposal, towing, storage up to 90 days, lien sale expenses, vessel appraisal, salvage and demolition. Surrendered vessel eligible expenses are hazardous material removal and disposal, towing from agency to landfill, and demolition. A little more detail on abandoned vessels. Before raising a fully submerged vessel, you should seek prior approval from DBW. There are many factors to be considered. For example, is the vessel several feet below the surface and only a small portion of it is creating a hazard? It may be feasible to remove just this section at a fraction of the cost rather than the entire vessel. Towing. Make it a habit to consult DBW before authorizing an expensive tow. Abandoned vessels may not need to be towed, and some can be safely sunk. And to remind you, for surrendered vessel, the grant can only pay for towing from your possession to the landfill. If you authorize a tow company to retrieve a vessel that's going to be surrendered, the grant will not pay for that tow. Your agency will be responsible for paying that tow company. Consult DBW before taking on an expense your agency may not get reimbursed for. Storage. 60 days will reimburse 60 days without a lien sale. If at your facility, 50% of whatever your posted rates are. Will reimburse 90 days if there is a lien sale. 50% of the posted rates for your agency. If you use a contract facility, we'll pay the 60 or 90 days at their posted rate. Salvage and demolition. DBW requires that you provide us with a copy of the contracts you have with your salvage or demolition vendors. This requirement is in our agreement under Exhibit B, Item 10. Please send me a copy of these contracts once signed by all agencies. Keep in mind that DBW will only reimburse for these expenses once the vessel has been destroyed. SAVE grantees are responsible for properly notifying DBW and the Coast Guard of all vessels they destroy. Again, it's important that you go through this checklist for each vessel you remove or vessel that is surrendered to you. Whenever you are not sure of if an item will be eligible for SAVE funding, you should check with me in advance and receive DBW approval prior to removing the item. This concludes my presentation. Please note, per the grant agreement, all grantees must attend an annual meeting. In this coming grant cycle, we will be incorporating a detailed section on how to correctly prepare reimbursement requests into the agenda for the annual meeting. This is my contact information and a reminder that the application is now open in Olga and will be closed at 5 p.m. on April 29th, 2022. Please note that I am the best contact if you need assistance with Olga or any other program-related information. We will now open the chat function to accept any questions. And so far, I do not see any questions in the chat.
So, another request to be emailed a copy of the slide deck. And yes, please send Ron an email requesting that he share that with you. Anybody that wants a copy of the presentation in the PowerPoint format can just email Ron. Otherwise, this webinar, the recording of this will be on our website, we hope within a week or so. This question is, are there any changes from SAVE-21? And the answer to that is there are minor changes, not necessarily in the application, but in the grant agreement. We are going to, one of the major changes that we really want to focus on is the option for marina owners who have vessels abandoned in their slip because the owner quit paying and walked away, that they can gain interest in that vessel through DMV and surrender it to a SAVE agency. So that will be something that will be new in the grant agreement. We also are going to start asking for copies of contracts with your salvage companies, because we just want to make sure you are actually using a contract with your salvage companies. Anything else that's new, Ron or Karen, that I haven't mentioned?
I can't think of anything offhand. I do know that we've updated our documents that you use to do your reimbursement requests. So
Yes.
as far as the grant agreement, the things that you covered are pretty much what's new.
Great.
I just want to add to that. All of the changes will be identified in the award letter or in the letters that we send before, along with the application. So you'll have a chance to take a look at that specifically.
Thank you. Okay. The next question says, in setting up the application, if we do not know what vessels are potentially going to be impounded, will they still be considered for reimbursement? The answer to that is yes. If we encourage you, when you're submitting your application, to have vessels identified, but if there are none in your area of responsibility, then you have the opportunity in our budget page to account for an estimated potential number of abandoned vessels that you could possibly encounter through the grant cycle, as well as potential number of surrendered vessels that may come to you during the grant cycle. And of course, they will all be eligible for reimbursement as long as they meet the criteria that Ron had on the slide in the checklist. We have another question. Just to confirm, you need a copy of the fully executed contract with the salvagers. That is correct. Or your service providers, whether or not they're a salvager, we want to see that you have executed contracts with any of your service providers that you're using, and then we'll be subsequently requesting reimbursement from us.
I do want to add to that. We have had grantees say that their contracting process is not the state's contracting process. We need you to follow your agency's contracting process, not necessarily the state's. So the state's, you have to go out and get 3 bids, do that entire process. If your agency does not require that, Debbie, I'm not speaking out of turn, am I? If
No,
your
this is perfect.
agency does not require that, we're not going to require you do that, but we do require that you have a contract. We've seen several agencies come and say, oh, well, they're charging this. Well, did you know how much it was going to be before you assigned the work? And then the estimates come back hugely expensive and out of line. So we want to see that you've gone through the process, that you followed your own process, and that there is a contract there. Standard business practices. That's all.
Thank you. There is another question now saying, has anything changed in the documents needed for reimbursement? No, we've updated the claim forms, hopefully making them more user-friendly for SAVE-21. Those are available now. And if any of you aren't a SAVE-21 grantee, you can request a copy of the updated forms from Ron. But we don't anticipate for SAVE-22 that we're going to make any more changes to the claim forms. And then, of course, the documents, the supporting documents we require, that hasn't changed either. The next question says, for SAVE-22, do we need to have 50% of SAVE-21 claimed when applying? No, we have done away with that criteria 2 years ago. So that is no longer a requirement. Everybody's eligible to apply for SAVE every year.
I do want to add another caveat to that. It is very important that each agency spend the money that they have available. If at the end, we know that the 50% requirement was a bit onerous. And so because we were asked to remove it, we did remove it. But it means that each agency really needs to be on spending the money that has been given. If we go through this, a couple of years of this, and money is left on the table when there's a need, we're going back. we're going back to monitoring how much is spent and when. So this is a testing period right now. We want to make sure that everyone is spending the money that they have. And if they can't spend it appropriately within their agency and cost effectively within their agency, then open it up to other agencies for the to be able to share it with others. There's so many needs across the state, and quite a few of you agencies, you're getting dumped on literally with all of these boats. So be good partners to each other and make the money available if there's excess, which means that you need to know ahead of time if you're going to have excess and not wait to the very last minute to say, oh, wait a minute, we've got 50 grand left. So do good financial management, good account, pay attention to your accounting so that if there's excess money available, you can make it available to other agencies. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing to that. If you leave money in the grant unspent, you will lose points on your next application. That's one of the questions where you do lose points for having not spent all your money. So there's that to consider as well. Another question now is, will a purchase order work in lieu of a contract? And yes, that is absolutely acceptable. We even have some agencies where their public contracting purchasing process is to get price estimates and to approve and sign them. And so we will accept that too. What we need to see is that you've done due diligence in getting the best price available for the work you're doing.
Okay, I don't see any more questions.
Yeah.
If we don't have any more questions, then
give another little half of a minute, and then in the meantime, I can just say, if anybody thinks of a question after the chat's closed, you can always email Ron.
Yes.
Okay, well, it's looking like maybe that's all of the questions we have for this moment. So any closing thoughts, Ron and Karen?
No, just thank you for everybody for participating, and then let's get rid of some boats.
Yeah, great sentiment, Ron, and we just want to thank you for all the work that you do out in the field. You guys are the champions in this. You are doing the work that we can't do, and we're grateful for everything that you do, and we want to support it as much as we possibly can. So have a great day, and thank you for participating in this. And we look forward to seeing you again on a future workshop and when we're out in the field. We're hoping to get out in the field to see what you guys are doing. Hopefully more this year once COVID eases up. Hopefully it eases up and goes away permanently. But we're looking forward to getting to know you guys better in person, seeing your conditions on site, and cleaning up our environment and making boating, recreational boating, safe again. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.